Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Sarah Wong. Our top stories tonight. Another grim day for Hong Kong as COVID infections hit a new high again. A man is arrested after a rubbish container is set on fire at a specimen collection station in Tai Wai. And police in Paris and Ottawa are on alert for anti-vaccination convoys. More than 1,500 COVID infections were reported today, setting a new record, with infections poised to remain high because of a similar number of preliminary positive cases. In a bid to free up hospital beds, the authorities are discharging patients who will not be able to transmit the virus. Isaac Lee reports.
Another day, another grim tally. There were a record 1,514 new COVID cases today. Only 5 were imported. The contagious Omicron variant remains dominant, with 1,419 infections. The virus claimed 3 more lives, one of them a 4-year-old boy. 2 elderly men, one aged 75 and the other an unvaccinated 98-year-old, also succumbed to COVID. The death toll since the start of the 5th wave has now risen to 8. There were more than 1,500 preliminary positive cases, also a new high. Since it takes time to send all infected people to hospital, health authorities urged them to take precautionary measures while waiting for an ambulance.
They should wear a mask at home if there are family members who tested positive, and try not to share utensils. And if possible, those infected family members should stay in their room and to avoid mixing with other family members or dining together.
Care homes for the elderly continued to be the hardest hit. The Center for Health Protection said 42 homes recorded infections, and people in 16 of them had to be evacuated. The latest ones included the Shun Yang Elderly Center in Sham Shui Po. 23 residents and staff tested preliminary positive. Public hospitals have also been affected, with 50 employees and 9 patients among the newly infected. To ease the shortage of beds, the hospital authority will relax its criteria for discharging COVID patients. From today, they can leave hospital if their CT values from 2 samples are higher than 30, indicating that the virus has no transmissibility. Those with an increasing level of antibodies will also be discharged. Isaac Lee, HKIBC.
The 4-year-old boy who died was Hong Kong's youngest COVID fatality. Health officials said his parents showed symptoms of the virus. Here's Isaac Lee again.
Cleaners disinfected a building in a Yuen Long village this morning. Jade Vilcourt was the residence of a 4-year-old boy who succumbed to COVID yesterday, becoming Hong Kong's youngest victim of a virus that has ravaged the world. His neighbors had seen the boy cycling on Thursday, less than 24 hours before his death. He was active as usual, this man said. Now the village is worried that other children will be infected because they often played together with the boy. At around 3 a.m. yesterday, he fell into coma after vomiting at home. He was rushed to Pok Oi Hospital, where doctors unsuccessfully tried to save him. Samples taken from his body were found to contain the virus. His death will be investigated by the coroner. Health expert David Hui said the virus could make children vomit and lead to pneumonia. He urged parents to monitor their children's health. Isaac Lee, HKIBC.
A health advisor says a citywide lockdown should be considered only as a last resort. This came as more than 30 preliminary positive cases were found in 2 public housing buildings in Sham Shui Po. Macy Mock reports.
Residents of Begonia House in Soho Estate walk free after an overnight lockdown. They had to undergo tests after sewage from the Sham Shui Po building was found to contain the virus. 9 preliminary positive cases were detected after about 1,100 people were screened. Also in Sham Shui Po, almost 2,000 people from Un Shing House in Un Chau Estate were tested during an overnight lockdown. The exercise yielded 23 preliminary positive and 2 indeterminate cases.
封城咧係一個最後手段嚟㗎啦。
As COVID infections mounted, there are fears of a possible citywide lockdown. Government pandemic advisor David Hui said that should be considered as a last resort because of many challenges. People would have to be fed, and it would be difficult to ensure that no one sneaks out. Hui said more time is needed to observe whether the current social distancing measures are effective. If not, public transport might have to be covered in the vaccine pass scheme. Welfare Chief Law Chi Kwong told a radio show that between 3,000 and 4,000 elderly residents of nursing homes are waiting to get vaccinated. He urged private doctors to find time to give them jabs. Maisie Mock, HKIBC.
The government is uncertain whether a citywide lockdown is required to cut transmission chains.
We need to have some time to review the effectiveness of the current social distancing measures, and there no a hard criteria to trigger any lockdown, but we have to consider a basket of factors before we decide a more drastic social distancing measures.
A man has been arrested following a fire at a mobile specimen collection station in Tai Wai. A video posted on Facebook shows people in hazmat suits pinning a man to the ground. He is suspected of setting fire to a rubbish container on the football pitch of Sun Chui Estate. The man was arrested on suspicion of arson and possession of an offensive weapon. No one was injured in the case, which was reported to police just before 5 p.m. A man who repairs electrical appliances has been arrested on suspicion of inciting people infected with COVID to spread the virus. Police said the 32-year-old was arrested in Central yesterday. He is alleged to have used an online discussion board in the past 2 months to incite others in violation of the Prevention and Control of Disease Ordinance. A chief inspector of the Technology Crime Division said a suspect is being detained for further investigation.
Some of the terms that he mentioned in the incitement speech, in a literal meaning, it means visited all the so-called blue shop for one-day tour and should go around spreading the virus.
Overseas, Japan is planning to ease border measures to help revive economic activity. Business travelers and foreign students could be allowed in after the current round of anti-COVID measures expired at the end of this month. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said a decision was made after weighing the health situation and public needs. But restrictions in hard-hit Tokyo and surrounding regions will be extended by 3 more weeks. Cases in Japan show little sign of slowing, with nearly 100,000 infections in the past 24 hours. People protesting against vaccine mandates have demonstrated across Australia and New Zealand. The uproar spurred by the so-called Freedom Convoy in Canada was also echoed in France. Thousands of officers in Paris are on high alert, preparing for the arrival of a so-called Freedom Convoy, protesting against COVID restrictions. Police vehicles line the Champs-Élysées to stem potential violence as drivers from across France rush to the French capital before heading to Brussels. The bumper-to-bumper demonstration was inspired by a 2-week blockade in Canada against a vaccine mandate. Wary of strict COVID curbs, the European protesters are angry with soaring fuel prices. Hundreds of lorry drivers in the Canadian capital, Ottawa, continue to block traffic despite warnings of harsh penalties. A state of emergency was declared in Ontario province, where truckers showed no signs of leaving a border bridge with the United States.
You don't end up losing your license, end up with a criminal record, which will impact your job, your livelihood, even your ability to travel internationally, including to the U.S.
There were also protests in Australia and New Zealand, where disgruntled crowds demanded the vaccine mandate be lifted. The United States plans to reopen its embassy in the Solomon Islands, the Pacific nation which was rocked by anti-China unrest last year. Secretary of State Antony Blinken made the announcement during a visit to Fiji. The top U.S. diplomat aims to strengthen U.S. ties with Pacific countries to counter China's growing influence. In 1997, Washington downgraded its diplomatic ties with the Solomons and closed its embassy there. But it wants to reverse the decision after the Solomons switched recognition from Taipei to Beijing. The leaders of Russia and the United States are expected to talk over the phone this weekend in an apparent effort to defuse tensions over Ukraine. U.S. President Joe Biden believes Russia has decided to invade Ukraine, although Moscow insists it has no such plans. Despite whirlwind diplomatic efforts to defuse tensions over Ukraine, the United States is insisting that Russia is bent on attacking its neighbor, an allegation Moscow has been shooting down since the crisis erupted. U.S. President Joe Biden claimed in an urgent call to NATO and European leaders that his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin has decided to mount an offensive. Biden's national security advisor warned of the distinct possibility of an invasion within days.
We continue to see signs of Russian escalation, including new forces arriving at the Ukrainian border. As we've said before, we are in the window when an invasion could begin at any time, should Vladimir Putin decide to order it.
Amid U.S. talks of an imminent Russian attack, Biden headed to Camp David, where he's expected to telephone Putin. The Russian strongman has repeatedly denied planning to attack Ukraine and blamed the West for stirring up tensions with disinformation. Efforts to de-escalate the crisis are continuing, with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz traveling to Moscow to meet Putin next week. Myanmar has freed hundreds of prisoners as it marked its 75th Union Day. People waited anxiously outside the gates of Insan prison in Yangon, the country's biggest city. Eventually, buses left the compound, carrying those who received a pardon. Myanmar's military rulers said more than 860 prisoners were freed. It's not known if political detainees were included in the amnesty. Thousands of people have been arrested in the past year for protesting against military rule. On to the weather now. Tomorrow will be mainly cloudy with some mist and rain patches. Temperatures range between 16 and 19 degrees. Brace for a cool Monday before sunny periods return on Tuesday. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. That's our main news for Saturday night. We'll come back at 10 tonight with more updates. I'm Sarah Wong. Thanks for joining us. Stay safe and take care.